take with the Christian New Testament is the myriad of mistranslations. For example, the original text of Isaiah 7:14 states the following: "Therefore, the Lord of his own shall give you a sign. Behold, the young woman is with child." The Hebrew word used here is Almah, meaning a young woman will give birth. However, the Christian theologians decided to translate the word to Betulah, which means virgin. But in Proverbs,
Hi, my name is Courtney. I am a Christian messianic apologist. This is not to harass you. This is simply just to defend our side, just like you're defending your side. There's a few, I think, misunderstandings, and I'd like to have the opportunity to correct that. So you said that the theologians translated it as Betulah. That might give someone the impression that the physical word, they swapped it out from Almah to Betulah, when that's not what I know that you mean. You actually mean, in your mind, in Matthew, when they translated the word Almah, they thought that it meant virgin, and virgin means Betulah, and so that's what you're trying to say. But for those who don't know the difference in those words, they may think, oh my gosh, my Christian translation literally removed a Hebrew word and put a completely different one in there. And I think that's something that we need to explain did not happen.
In Proverbs, it states, "There are three things which are too wonderful for me, for which I do not understand. The way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a serpent on a rock, the way of a ship in the middle of the sea, and the way of a man with a young woman." Almah, this is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, "I have done no wrong." King Solomon is comparing these four things with one another, so as to say that each thing leaves no trace behind it. He declares that once a man has been sexually intimate with an Almah, a young woman, no trace of sexual intercourse is visible. Unlike a Betulah, a virgin, who will leave behind a discharge of blood. King Solomon explains that once this adulterous woman eats, meaning fornicates, he removes the trace of her sexual infidelity, meaning she wipes her mouth and says, "I have done no wrong." Therefore, we see that in the Hebrew language, the word Almah, meaning young woman, is not synonymously used with the word Betulah, meaning a virgin.
Okay, so here you said a lot, but the essence is this. Proverbs 30 is speaking about an adulterous woman, and therefore, if she's an adulterous woman, she's not a virgin. And some do interpret to bring verse 20 up to verse 19. Verse 20 is where it speaks of the adulterous woman, but verse 19 is where it speaks of the four things. And the four things, if you count, stops at verse 19. Sure, you could theologically, I guess, interpret to bring verse 20 up, but there's problems with that. What are some of the problems? I'll explain. So Almah is never used of a woman who's already had kids. If you can find me an example, then I'd be grateful, but there's no example showing that she's married and already had kids, okay? So if a woman is married, already had kids, then goes out on her husband, she would be called an adulterous woman. But see, the issue is, since we can't find an example of Almah or Almot being used of a woman who is promiscuous, then we can't rightly assume that verse 20 should be brought up to verse 19. This would be the first case of that. And with that being the first case, you can't then use that to support the Isaiah 7 argument that you're trying to use it to support. You would have to find another passage as your supporting passage, which again, it doesn't exist. Also, I wanted to cover the fact that people often think, while Betulah does more times than not denote virginity, it isn't always exclusive. I think this is a huge issue that some maybe don't see, but I'm going to show you an example of where it doesn't. See here in Isaiah 47, you see Almah Betulah, and then we got to go down to see what happens to this Betulah. First, let's read. "Come, sit down in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon." Okay, so here's what's happening. So if we read 47 verse 8, it says, "Hear now, thou art given to pleasures, thou dwellest carelessly, and thou sayest in thy heart, I am none else besides me," right? "I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children." Why would a Betulah be a widow. Why would further over, would a virgin have loss of children? And you might say, well, this is her saying it's never going to happen. Right. But we get down here and then the Lord God says, in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. So this is what this prideful person says, which is metaphorical, but still nonetheless, you can see the word is being used here. So we also have an example in Joel 1 verse 8 where it says, and I quote, "Lament like a virgin girded with sackcloth for the husband of her youth." Now there's a couple ways to understand that, and we need to, I guess, rightly divide that so that we can be honest with the text. One, it could be a woman who loses her husband before they consummate the marriage. Fine. However, if you look at the word for husband, it is Baal. And Baal is never used for a man who's just in a betrothal. This means he's literally already a husband. And to be that husband, not in a betrothal way, but in the full consummated way, you'd have to consummate the marriage, which means she'd not be a virgin anymore, which means she's weeping for the man who took her virginity, which is why the text would likely associate her with this. But nonetheless, this is an issue that we need to rightly look at.
The only word, both in biblical and modern Hebrew, that conveys sexual purity. Moreover, the masculine version of the word Almah, which is Elim, and means a young man, not a male virgin. This word appears twice in the Jewish scriptures. As expected, without exception, all Christian Bibles correctly translate Elim as a young man, lad, and never a virgin. Why?
So she goes on to say, why is it that in all the other translations in English, you see it correctly associates this person with youth rather than virginity, and yet in Isaiah 7:14, it speaks of virginity? I'll explain that. So even though King David, which is the 2 times Elim is used, he is a virgin, it's not pertinent to the text. And I do agree that Christian translations should maybe say something like the young male virgin. Okay. Just like I think that they in Isaiah 7:14 should say the young maiden virgin rather than just virgin, because I believe, as the word Almah explains 5 connotations, right? That she's a woman, obviously, that she's concealing herself, as the root explains, that she is righteous, never had kids, never been married, and obviously a virgin. I believe that we should denote that. Now, you can't denote the fullest semantic range of every word in every translation, in every the Bible would just be too long. So I hear you, and I think that we should do a better job, and newer translations have. But your point is that, see, it doesn't mean virgin, when actually the word does denote virginity and absolutely can denote virginity, which is why some of the earliest church fathers said, especially Jerome, that if you can show me one time Almah is used of a woman who's married, already had kids, etc., then I will concede my ignorance. But it was never shown and can't be shown. And so Elim also speaks of David before he was able to consecrate the marriage. And again, it's only used twice in the Hebrew Bible. These words are not used much, which means if we're going to discuss these things, we really should study out both sides. And I've done a pretty good job of studying out your side. So now I hope that I have invited you to study out my side. And maybe you could see that Christians are not just, well, making up stuff, that we at least have a good basis for the reasons why we believe what we believe. But if you're interested, let me know and I can help you study it out. Shalom.